You didn't get to where you are by playing small. You got here by outworking, outthinking, and outleading the room. But the higher you climb, the harder the questions get, and nobody hands you a playbook for this level. Welcome to Full Strength Leader, the podcast for executives, high performers, and leaders who refuse to coast, with surface-level leadership advice and ready to do the real work. Hi, I'm Kabrina Ashley, applied neuroscience practitioner and leadership consultant, and this is where I bring you the intersection of science and strategy and where real leadership gets built. Every episode, I bring you the research, the real talk, and the frameworks you need to lead at your absolute best, even when things feel upside down and on fire. Because half-strength leadership isn't an option. This is Full Strength Leader. On May 20th of this year, a Tuesday, 8,000 people at Meta opened their laptops and found out they no longer worked there. They had not missed their numbers. Meta did not miss its numbers. The company spent the year before posting record profits. The same day, Intuit cut 3,000 people, about 17% of its global workforce. That was the same day. 2 days later, Wix announced 20% decrease. Earlier in the spring, Oracle quietly cut around 30,000 jobs. None of these companies are in trouble. All of them are taking the money that used to pay those people and pouring it into AI infrastructure. Meta alone is spending between $115 and $135 billion on AI this year. That's a 73% increase over last year. The cuts are not because the work is not getting done. The cuts are because the cash needs to go somewhere else. If you are listening to this and you have been laid off, or you are watching it happen around you, or you are the leader who had to make the calls, I want you to hear me. This is not a referendum on you, and that is the part that is going to mess with you the most. Today, we're talking about what to do when you get fired by a company and you did nothing wrong. The math just wasn't mathing. I'm Kabrina Ashley, and this is Full Strength Leader, where we talk about leadership unfiltered. And this is one of those topics that we don't necessarily want to talk about because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to realize that resources are being shifted away, and it's nobody's fault that you lost a job or that somebody that you know lost their job. It's that somebody else's priorities changed and they didn't take into account other people around them in the process. So let's walk through the data because this is the part that many people are missing. Meta's Chief People Officer, Janelle Gale, sent the internal memo on April 23rd that says, quote, "We are doing this as part of our continued effort to run the company more efficiently and to allow us to offset the other investments we are making." End quote. Translating that, the other investments are AI. They're firing people to buy GPUs. They canceled 6,000 open requisitions on top of the 8,000 cuts, so the effective headcount reduction is closer to 14,000. They moved another 7,000 employees into what they are calling AI pods. New titles including AI Builder, AI Pod Lead, AI Org Lead. Mark Zuckerberg sent his own note. The headline was, quote, "Success is not a given in the AI era." I want to read that one more time. Success is not a given. From the founder of a company worth over $1 trillion to people he is firing, the day he's firing them. Now, before you write this off as a meta story, let me give you the wider picture because this is happening in multiple areas, in multiple places. Tech layoffs in 2026 have already passed 142,000 people. And just looking at the research today, we're looking at more like 150 from when I wrote my notes for this podcast. So we're losing roughly 968 tech workers a day across all sectors. The number is 134,000 plus and climbing. Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, said last week in public that almost no one is being hired in his industry except for in sales. He said it like it was a weather report, which luckily he still believes that sales and closing the deal is human focused, but at the same time, we're thinking that nothing else needs a human in it because we can just put AI on it. Software developer employment for workers under 26 has fallen nearly 20% since 2022, and the entry level is not slowing down. It's disappearing. So if you're somebody who's getting out of school and being like, God, it's so hard to find a job, you're not imagining that. That is actually happening. And here's the number that should rearrange how you think about all of this. Harvard Business Review published research from Thomas Davenport at Babson and MIT in January. They surveyed over 1,000 global executives. 60% of them said they had already reduced headcount in anticipation of AI. 2% said the layoffs were tied to actual AI implementation. 60% on anticipation, and 2% on actual replacement. So companies are not firing you because AI is doing your job. Companies are firing you because they are predicting that AI will do your job. Eventually, maybe. And the stock market rewards them for moving early. You're not being replaced, you're being preemptively erased in this moment. That doesn't mean anything about you, though, and we're going to go into that in just a minute. But here's the kicker. A recent survey found that 55% of leaders and CEOs who fired people because of AI already regret it. 55%. And most of them never replaced anyone with AI. They cut, the work did not get easier, and the AI did not magically pick up the slack. The teams that remained absorbed the work and burned out, and the executives are quietly trying to backfill those positions because this is how the market works. If I fire somebody, I was just explaining this to a friend of mine. If I fire a mass group of people and say that it's because the economy, my stock goes down. If I fire a mass group of people and say that it's because innovation, like AI, my stock goes up. Because from the outside, we're seeing a different story. Remember how we talked about in our last episode? We talked a lot about the story that we're telling. We fill in the blank based on the very little information that we have, whether we are the public sector or the private sector, we are always going to fill in that information. So, what does this mean? It means the layoffs you're seeing are not even the rational, brutal versions of capitalism that everyone is treating them as. They are panicked decisions. They are corporate theater for boards and shareholders. They are bets on a future that, by the executive's own admission, they can't deliver on yet. And the price of that corporate theater is paid by the people whose names appear on the list. And I want you to remember this idea of theater as we go through this episode, because I want to name something that is true and also a little brutal. If you've been let go in this wave, you probably did nothing wrong. And that's the thing that's going to be the hardest part to metabolize, because we are wired as humans to look for the lesson. We want this to be about us. If it's a referendum, we can do something about it next time. When it's not a referendum, we feel lost, like, well, what am I supposed to do if I did nothing wrong? Why did I get let go? And then it raises a lot of questions that are harder to answer. But it's not a referendum. It's a capital reallocation. And the thing that took your job had nothing to do with you. And that is what makes it almost impossible to grieve cleanly. And we're going to talk about grief of your job loss in just a moment. But let's talk about what is happening in your brain when this lands. Because if you understand the neuroscience, you can stop fighting yourself in this and start to move forward in your job search and what you want to do next. Because here's the fact about your brain that most of us in the United States have never been taught is your brain does not separate who you are from what you do. The neural networks that store your professional identity, your job title, your sense of competence, your daily structure, those networks overlap massively with the networks that store your self-concept. This is not pop psychology. This is how the brain is built. There's decades of research on what is called the work-related self. When you lose your job, your brain does not register a category change of I'm just moving from this job to this next job. It registers as an identity injury. The MRI looks like grief because it is grief. Now, layer on top of that the part we already know about ambiguity from the last episode. The brain processes ambiguity as roughly twice as threatening as known risk. And what is a layoff, especially this kind of layoff, if not pure ambiguity? Nobody knows anything about anything. So now we're asking questions like, why me? Why now? Was it my work? Is something coming back? Will I find something? What is my industry going to look like in 18 months? Am I going to have to take a pay cut? Are my skills going to be relevant? Are my contacts strong enough? Do I have what it takes to move forward in this? And if you're already feeling a little anxious hearing some of those questions, stopping, taking a deep breath and going, okay, this is what we're doing to figure this out. And part of figuring stuff out is going through the uncomfortableness of doing it. It's that idea of going on a bear hunt, and I have to go through the uncomfortableness of walking through the mud, of doing the things that I need to do in order to get to the end goal. And every one of those questions that we just asked is an unknown. And your amygdala is firing all day. Your cortisol is up, your sleep is shorter, your prefrontal cortex, the part of that your brain that handles strategic thinking, is impaired right now because of all of that. So you're trying to plan the next phase of your career using the brain hardware that is least capable of planning. So if you're feeling that stressed and in your chest, it's just grinding together like there's just something that's squeezing your insides. It's a very normal feeling. And trying to get into a place, as hard as that sounds, easier to say than it is to do, of calm. Whether that's, I'm going to go for a run, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to get outside and put my toes in the grass. Something that's going to bring you back to this moment right now. Because it can feel like the sky is falling when you're in this kind of situation, especially if you don't have a savings, you don't have anything in place. These are things that can be absolutely catastrophic, and I don't want to lessen that. But I also want to say, when we get stuck in that catastrophic mode, it's harder to make the decisions that we need to make that are going to get us to the next part of our life that's going to make this better. So that is why job searching from a place of this fresh layoff feels like swimming through sand, because you're not regulated. It's not because you're weak, it's because your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do under this kind of threat, which is fast, narrow, defensive thinking. Think about being chased by a lion or a tiger, which is the opposite of what you need right now. So now here's where it gets philosophically interesting and a little dark. And this is research that I've been reading recently. And I actually had it pulled up because of the fact that the name of this is so interesting to me. She called this, and the award for Best Actor goes to. And I want you to remember that title for a minute, because there's a researcher who wrote this article, and her name is Patricia Hulin, who studies what she calls facades of conformity, the behavior of pretending to fit the values of an organization that we deep down do not actually share. Hulin and her collaborators have shown that the more we shape ourselves to fit an employer, the more we tangle our self-concept with that employer. So think about that for a second. If you've been at a company for years, you start to form similar identities. So we're not just employees, we become composites of that. Half of us, half company. And then the company lays us off and the composite falls apart because they're no longer in the picture. Half of you is suddenly missing. You're not having a normal grief reaction, you're having a self-concept emergency. The reason you cannot sleep is not that you lost a paycheck, it's that you lost a version of yourself, of who you are. Because what do we do when we introduce ourselves? We say, "Hi, my name is," and then the next question that people ask normally is, "What do you do?" Because we're trying to figure out who you are based on what your name is and what you do for a living. And if anybody can tell you this, it's people that have had multiple kinds of jobs over the years as they've grown, is that a job can't identify you, even though we try so desperately to make that the case. And this is why the people who are the most loyal, the most committed, Most all in often have the hardest time recovering from a layoff. They had the most of themselves invested, and your loyalty was rewarded by being the deepest cut. I'm not telling you I'm not telling you this to make you cynical. This is just what the research says. I'm telling you so that you can hear with neurological clarity that the answer is not next time I will work harder, I will push more, I will put in more hours, I will work longer. The answer is next time I will not let one employer become the structural support beam of my entire identity, which is, again, easier said than done. But we have to be aware of this when we're in this situation. So there's one more piece of brain science I want you to understand, because this is the door out. Neuroplasticity. This is something that is one of my favorite concepts in brain science. And it's the brain is not a fixed object. It rewires based on what you practice. If you've been practicing being a high-performing version of yourself inside one organization for 7 years, your brain has hardwired that as the dominant pattern. When you lose the role, you lose the daily practice that was reinforcing the pattern. Within weeks, your brain starts to lose certainty about who you are. This is why a lot of recently laid off people describe feeling like they do not recognize themselves. But the good news is, and this is the most important thing I will say in this whole episode, is that the same plasticity that built the old identity can build a new one. But it has to be practiced on purpose. Identity is a verb, not a noun. You have to build it daily in small reps, the way you would build a muscle. And the only way it works is if you stop waiting for the next employer to tell you who you are. I want you to think about this time like Play-Doh. We made one creation, and now we're going to squish those back in, and we're going to make another creation. You get to do this however you want. And every time you make that creation, it's going to get better and better and better. And so we'll talk about, I've got a set of cards that I give away during Lunch and Learns that is all about things that you can do to reset. And one of those resets is called decide in advance. So I'm going to decide in advance what I'm going to do when something happens. And one of the other ones that when you download this, I'd love for you to practice is a brain prime. What is the thing that I want to believe about myself? What are the things that I'm working towards? And I'm going to talk about them as if they've already happened, because your brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So if I can imagine a future of, oh my God, I'm never going to find a job. This is terrible. I'm never going to get anywhere that I want to go. What is your brain going to do? It's going to prove you right. But if I can go, okay, cool. I got let go. There's nothing I can do about it. It wasn't my fault because these people made a decision with no concern for me, because that's the reality most of the time. And now I have to be, what kind of person do I need to be in order to be the person for this next position that I want? And I love this idea. There's a lot of dating books that talk about this. And I don't think we talk about it enough in real life outside of dating, of what kind of person do I need to be for this kind of partner that I want? What if we were saying that same exact thing for your job? What kind of person do I need to be? Let's say that you were, a manager and you want to move into vice president because that's the next thing that would have been in your company. I want to be vice president. What do I need to be? Who do I need to be? What do I need to know? What things do I need to upskill in order to be that person? And that becomes your to-do list. And then we start saying, I just got promoted into the VP position, and we're listening to that over and over again. This is what I do with my one-on-one coaching clients, is how do we, as high performers, become higher performers when the anxiety is off the charts and we've got bills to pay and mortgages and kids' sports to go to and pay for? Because anybody who has a kid who's listening, they are freaking expensive. And every time that something happens in life, you're like, I know we have to pay for this, but we don't have the money for it. And those are the moments that we're trying to get through and get to that place where we can feel more comfortable. So we can absolutely have that conversation if that's something that you're interested in. But here's the thing that I want to talk about today is there's 3 things I want you to practice regardless of whether you have been laid off, you're at risk, or you're sitting pretty safe today. Because the only people who are truly safe in this era are the ones who behave like they're not. So, number one is untangle your identity from your employer practically, and you need to start it today. Because here's the exercise. I want you to sit down and I want you to write your professional self-description without using your company name, your title, or your industry. You have to be able to describe what you are good at, what you care about, and what you're building in language that would still be true if you woke up tomorrow with no job. What are the things that people go, oh my God, Susan, this is exactly what you're the best at. Oh, John, this is what I come to you for. And if you can't do that exercise, your identity is too entangled with the place that signs your paycheck. And that is a huge amount of work that needs to be done. Then I want you to make a habit of speaking that version of yourself out loud to friends, in meetings, when you introduce yourself. When someone asks you what you do, lead with the version of you that is portable, not the version of you that is rented from your employer. And I want you to think about that for a second. People who hire you are renting your time and expertise. They don't own you. They're renting you. So just like we talked about, I used to build out email systems. And I always would talk to people about you own your email list. You don't own social media. This is the same thing. They are renting your time and your expertise. That means that if you can build your expertise and a company pays for it, fabulous. Take that opportunity every chance you get. But if there's a skill that you want to learn, learning it on your own is going to be so valuable to you. Whether you take classes, you get a coach, you go to a seminar, whatever it is, however you decide to learn that, investing in yourself will always pay off. Number two, build a parallel job on purpose. And before you shut me down, I want you to hear me carefully. I'm not telling you to start a side hustle. I'm not telling you to become a content creator. I am telling you to treat your career like it has two streams. Stream one is your employer. They pay you. They get your work. Stream two is you. You pay yourself in skills, network, and reputation that exist outside of the company. What does that look like? It looks like one new relationship a month with someone in your field who does not work at your company. One piece of public-facing work a quarter, even if it's just a LinkedIn post that shows your thinking. And one skill on the side that compounds your value across more than one employer. Remember that upskilling we were talking about, learning new things? And then one reference relationship a year with someone who is not your boss. This isn't extra. This isn't adding to your plate. This is your new job. Because the version of you that has a parallel stream is the version of you that survives a Tuesday morning email. So you should be in a position where you could easily reach out to people and go, I lost my job. What opportunities do you know about? And they should be handing you a bunch of them because you're going to be that person for other people. So you're going to pay attention to job openings at your company, things that you see online. You're going to email them to people that you know are looking to leave a position so that you can create that reciprocity back and forth. So not thinking about it as another stream of income, thinking about it as your stream of future income. And then number three is lead the conversation with yourself first. When something like this happens, like these layoffs, whether to you or around you, the brain wants to narrate. And some people, I know not everybody has this, but some people will have that narrator feeling in their head of this is what's happening. Think about it like a movie. And it will narrate badly if you let it. It will say things like, I should have seen it coming. I'm too old. I'm too expensive. I'm too much. The market is over. AI is coming for everything. You have to lead that narration. Not by lying to yourself and not by toxic positivity, but by telling yourself the truth. The actual truth sounds like this. The decision that took my job was not about me. It was about capital allocation. I was good at my work. I am still good at my work. The market is hard right now, and it is going to take time. I'm going to do the things I can control. I'm going to build a parallel stream. I'm going to be honest with the people who love me. I'm not going to pretend to be okay when I am not. I am not going to organize my next decade around panic. I want you to read that out loud once a day. If you're in the storm, this is going to be one of those things that anchors you because your brain believes the voice that talks to it most. And that voice that talks to it most is you. And there's a lot of things that I talk with my one-on-one clients on because a lot of times the voice that we hear in our head isn't our voice. It's a voice of somebody before we were 25 that said, you can or you can't. And that's the thing that gets repeated when these things happen. That's why people who grew up in very positive, very go for it, you can do anything kind of environments tend to do well. And people who are told you're never gonna accomplish anything, you're not gonna amount to much, have a harder time and have to push through these kinds of scenarios. So make sure that that voice is yours, not your former employer, not the algorithm, not a parent, not a former teacher, yours. If you are a leader listening to this and you have not been cut, but you have been doing the cutting, this episode is for you too. I want you to do something uncomfortable. Acknowledge to yourself that the people who report to you that what happened was not a reflection of the people who left. Do not let the narrative drift towards, well, they were not really performing. They were not the right person for the job. All of those things. They probably were performing, and nobody is perfect. So there's always going to be things that we can find if we really look for stuff. But the math just didn't work like the company wanted it to. So your team is watching how you talk about the people who are no longer in the room and are deciding whether to trust you the next time. So what are you saying? What is the narration that you're giving your team about the people that are gone, about the people that are no longer at the company? Because if they were doing the work, showing up every day, doing what they needed to do, and they still got let go, it's almost worse for the people who stay because of the fact that now they're like, oh my God, what do I need to do? Do I need to work harder? Do I need to do these things? And this goes back to our episode on hunkering down because of the fact that that's what people do when they're afraid. We either decide to leave or we stay in place and freeze. So if you're at any point in the story, the laid off, the at risk, the survivor, or the leader, I want you to look at these reset cards that we'll have in the show notes for you. And they're at kabrinaashley.com/the-reset-cards. And those are going to walk you through 7 different things that you can do that will just give you that breath of what this looks like. And normally I only give these to my lunch and learns that bring me in. But I think that this is so vital for this specific topic because you need to be able to reset yourself in the midst of all of this chaos. AI is happening. It's here to stay. We have to know how to work around it. And it's not necessarily all bad. Unfortunately, it gets a really bad rap when it can be a really great tool. So trying to look at the positives of it while still understanding with good skepticism that it is still one of those things that we need to be aware of. And if you want me to walk you through your specific next 90 days, whether you're just lost your job or you're trying to move to a new job, or you're leading people in this process, and I want you to book a strategy call. And the link for that will be in the show notes. And we can walk through this hand in hand together. And if you're listening to this and you got hit by this wave, I want you to hear this clearly. You are still you. Your work is still your work. The decision was not a verdict on you. It was a line item. And you do not have to organize the rest of your life around someone else's line item. So I want you to take that deep breath. Go outside. This is not the end. This can be the end of this chapter. It doesn't have to be the end of everything. I know it feels heavy, and I know that there's nothing that anybody can say that's going to make you feel better in this moment when this happens to you, or if this recently happened to you, or if you're in the job looking and it's been months. That's real, and you have every right to feel the way that you do in this moment. If you don't have a therapist and you need one, please reach out. And I'm happy to send you resources on places to go. That's a great place to start. But remember that you are you and that your job does not identify you. This is Full Strength Leader, and I will see you next week. That's a wrap on today's episode of Full Strength Leader. Take the lesson from today into your leadership this week and see what magic happens. If this episode hit home, I want to hear from you. Drop your questions, your reaction, or your biggest takeaway on Spotify in the comments under this episode. I read every single one, and your questions shape what we talk about next. And if you thought of someone during the show, do me a favor and share this episode with them. And don't forget to follow along so you never miss an episode. You can find me to connect and work with me directly at KabrinaAshley.com. Full Strength Leader starts here. We'll see you next week.